Hello and welcome to today's video. This time we're going to be shelf touring my vintage Penguin specials. Now I've absolutely loved the Penguin specials ever since I've been collecting vintage penguins, which is, well, almost 40 years now. And the specials always hold a special place in my heart. I just love them. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's take a look. Okay then, so let's start at the start with Penguin Special number 1. And it's this one here, Germany Puts Back the Clock. Now, the early Penguin specials had dust wrappers issued, the same as the regular Penguins. Some of mine, I've got most of them with dust wrapper. I think I'm missing maybe a handful. But some of my dust wrappers are a little bit suspect. So I prefer to have them on the shelf without the dust wrappers because they look a bit better. But this first one here, Germany Puts Back the Clock, was published by Penguin, revised with additional chapters in 1937. So yeah, a new chapter on the situation today. So the Penguin specials were very much, you could almost say it was almost like a Penguin magazine, in that they would publish 1 or 2 of these a month, sometimes a couple more, and they were very much immediate, responding to things that were happening predominantly in the UK, but also around the world, but mainly the UK, during the Second World War. And they really are historical documents from that point of view. I think they're fantastic. The pre-war ones, before things got tough with paper rationing, I think are really, really nice, sort of attractive volumes, and they make a nice change to collect these, as opposed to the main series, you know. So yeah, Mussolini's Roman Empire, and the other good thing is, apart from a couple of tougher ones, on the whole, these books are actually quite cheap to collect. So yeah, you can get a run of these together without too much trouble. There's 2 distinct series. There's like the Wartime series, then it stops for a few years, then it comes back into the 60s and into the late 60s, in fact. So we'll look at the whole run today, and I think, bar a couple of late ISBN ones, I've got every one. So we'll see the full set. That's number 3. Some numbers were issued or were assigned books, but they never actually had the book published. So there are some numbers which there was no book ever published for them. Number 4 there, Searchlight on Spain. Now this is interesting because it's an entirely new book, so it is a Penguin paperback original, a bit like they were doing with Pelican at around this same sort of time Pelican launched, and that had some original books too. Now this one here is a Penguin special, but you can see it's in Pelican colours, so it says a Pelican special because it wasn't sort of, I guess, war related. It was just, you know, a book on ballet. And quite a famous one at that. Beautiful book with the wood engravings there as well. And I do have a second copy of that one, and I'm not entirely sure. I think this one must be a reprint. I remember now. Yeah, this one. This was a prize, I think, like from a reader of the Sunday Times. I think it was, like a prize or a review copy or something. There we are, the Sunday Times with compliments. The Sunday Times National Book Fund. So it was like one that was sent out by the Sunday Times newspaper. So that's why I've got 2 copies of Ballet. And then another one, German Modern Art. This one is in a wrapper. So you get an idea. It's just the same as the regular sort of Penguin wrappers of the period, which are, really nice. Number 7 there, China Struggles for Unity, with 24 maps. And this is more your typical Penguin special, the Air Defence of Britain. Really, really good, this sort of stuff. This is what I find fascinating, the air raid precautions and things like that. There's later on we'll see books on one of my favourites, signalling and map reading for the Home Guard. It's proper Dad's Army stuff, this. Europe and the Czechs. Jewish problem. And these were all, in a lot of cases, these were pre-war books which came to prominence at the outbreak of the Second World War. Literary Taste, another one that was done as a Pelican. The Mortal Storm. What Hitler Wants. Once again, it was sort of taking the temperature, I suppose, of, the British national conscience. How were people feeling? This is 1939. Look at the dedication inside. dedicated in sorrow and mourning to the memory of the Democratic Republic of Czechoslovakia. During the dark days of September 1938, when Germany invaded, of course. Moer in China. Moer was a reporter, and this was his report on China. One Man Against Europe. This is another early favourite of mine. I mean, I absolutely love it. And in fact, I wouldn't mind getting a better copy of this one, because it's just one of my all-time early favourite Penguin specials. It's a Pelican special. So we take off that little dust wrapper, and it's by Robert Gibbons. Now, you may have heard of Robert Gibbons. He was famous for wood engraving, and he did quite a bit of work for Penguin, and this one's just gorgeous. All the illustrations are by the author as well, and it's just terrific. I really, really like this. It's just a gorgeous book. There he is, looking very grizzled, isn't he? But he did loads of stuff, absolutely loads of stuff for Penguin, and this is, I think, an absolute masterpiece. It's a truly, truly great book when it was published as well. I always pick up Robert Gibbons stuff when I come across it, which isn't often, but I've been recently started to collect early Folio Society stuff, and he did some stuff for them, so that's on the radar now. And look for a video on vintage Folio Society books coming up quite soon on the channel. Anyway, out of all my Pelicans, that is definitely one of my favourites. Warning from the West Indies. The Great Illusion Now. Another good one. Mass Observation. So during the war, people were told to basically record what was happening at their workplace, at schools and colleges, and every aspect of British life for a project called Mass Observation. And that's what this is. It is mass observation, and is an absolute snapshot of this time in British history. Mass observation and their studies are often referenced in the Dominic Sandbrook sort of history of the British Isles, and once again, this is an absolute key book. Whitman Steed's The Press, Ourselves and Germany. Another nice Pelican special, the one on design there. That's really good. Once again, they managed to get some illustrations inside, which, considering the time, and they were already starting to feel a little bit of pressure for paper allowance, was amazing. But that's another thing. So these Penguin and Pelican specials, on the whole, had print runs of 250,000 copies each, these early ones especially, which is why they're not difficult to find today. There was a lot of copies sent out. And Penguin's wartime paper allowance was based on their pre-war sales. So because Penguin were doing such great guns with these pre-war, their wartime Penguin allowance, or paper allowance rather, was greater than almost all the other publishers combined. So they were able to keep publishing books throughout the war, albeit in very, very thin sort of editions. I Was Hitler's Prisoner. And very much. I mean, look at this, the tagline, the most moving book that has come out of Nazi Germany. Between Two Wars. Britain's Health. Microbes by the Million, which is, once again, it's topical at the time. They're not all wartime related or war related, but most of them are. You and the Refugee. What next? The questions we are all asking. That sums up the Penguin specials in a nutshell. They're taking the temperature of the British public and putting it into a book form. And believe me, these books sold, well, very, very well indeed. Why War? The Food Problem and its relation to our national defences, because that was obviously a concern, wasn't it? The New German Empire. Number 34 here on Poland. Once again, a book that you would think would be much more suited to be a regular Pelican book, but here we are. It's in the specials. And then The Attack from Within, which is number 36. Okay, so number 37 is The Good Soldier Schweck. Now, you're probably familiar with this title. Nowadays, it's regarded as a classic. This was the first time Penguin published it, I think in 1939, yeah. This is a wrappered copy. And this one was first published as a special, then it became a Penguin main series title, then eventually a Penguin classic. British Agriculture. So there's not going to be that many more books which we would consider as pelicans in the pelican colouring anymore. This one on the Suez Canal, this is number 39. Beautiful book, this. This is on the history and building of the Suez Canal. One on opera, and that was a paperback original by Penguin. And look at this, H.G. Wells, a new book by H.G. Wells. This is an H.G. Wells first edition, In Search of Hot Water. And he wrote quite a bit for a Penguin as specials. I mean, really, it's like a very extended essay that they've fleshed out a little bit to about 130 pages. But still very, very nice to have. And, you know, if you like H.G. Wells, and I certainly do like a lot of his stuff, you know, these are really worth picking up. And I don't think they're, first published 1939. They're not like, you know, mega money or anything. You should be able to find most of these specials for a reasonable price. The expensive ones I will point out to you. Light on Moscow. Now this next one is the first, I would say, slightly pricier book in the Penguin specials. It's the Government Blue Book. Now this is basically, it is HMSO government documents, a wartime related one, published by the Stationer's Office. Penguin published it, of course, but it's all the communications and reports from the Houses of Parliament and things like that. Yeah, and this one in particular, it says documents concerning German-Polish relations and the outbreak of hostilities between Great Britain and Germany on September the 3rd, 1939. This one tends to go for £10 to £15. If you see this one around, do pick it up. I think I've only ever had 2 copies through my hands, and it is genuinely scarce, that one. So it just didn't sell, I think, for whatever reason. The Case for Federal Union. Another great one, Why Britain is at War. And you would see these sort of piled up. If I can, I've got a picture somewhere of like a newsagent's, and they got these massive piles of Penguin specials. And if I can find that one, I shall pop it into the video right now, because it's just an amazing picture, and it gives you an idea of how quickly these books were selling. People were picking them up, a bit like newspapers. And these were specifically Penguin specials with this sort of a cover on them. Penguin Political Dictionary, really nice, that one. I love this sort of lettering. Reused recently on the Penguin 90th, that particular font. This is another example of the specials being specials. It's an oblong book, so it's by cartoonist Lowe. And he had 3 published by Penguin, and these are his cartoons. I think they're from, where are they from? The Evening Standard. There we are. And it's all predominantly wartime related stuff. I think they're really nice. Very, very interesting. These, once again, are perhaps a little bit more expensive than your regular book, but not a fortune. You know, I would say your average Penguin special is £3 to £5, and that is possibly 8 to 10. So not too bad. Next one is number 50 here, and it's yet another H.G. Wells. Look at that, The Rights of Man. What are we fighting for? #51 here. Must the war spread? Unser Kampf. There's a smattering of religious titles in here in the Penguin run. This one is by John Hadman, Good God. And there are a few of those in here. My Finnish Diary. So there are also wartime memoirs. And this gives you an idea about the sort of immediacy of something will get written and it will be brought to print and mass produced within just like a month or so. It's just incredible, really, the turnaround. It was so quick. But that is, you know, that's what this series was like. Hitler's War, Before and After. Problem with India. I've got 2 copies of this one. Yes, I've got a regular one and an export one. This one, I believe, was sold in the UK, would have had a sticker on it, which has been pulled off. But basically, that's how they were. They were for sale in Great Britain only. They were not for export. But yeah, there's one on the problem of India. Stalin and Hitler. And look at these, they're starting to get thin now because paper rationing is starting to bite ever so slightly. So the quality's there. Dust wrappers have been dropped, of course. Yeah, we're looking at May 1940. So we very much got our air raid shelter hats on at the moment. Here's another oblong one, Warships at Work. Very much like that one. And I was pretty sure, though for some reason I can't put my hand on it, I was pretty sure I have a reprint of that one somewhere, so we may have a little look at that. Maybe I'm thinking of another one. Why Freedom Matters, number 62. And you'll see we've got adverts now on these Penguin books. This is one of the last Pelican ones on hydroponics, no less. Common Sense of War and Peace. And this is, once again, it's another H.G. Wells original. This is, I think, the last one that he did for Penguin. He really did like Penguin books, H.G. Wells, right up until when he died. Another religious one there from the Bishop of Chichester. Christianity and World Order. Got our Penguin Political Atlas there. Labour in the War. Introduction by Bevan. Yeah, Ernest Bevan, MP. 1940. It was still, obviously it was a subject. People still voted and what have you. The Case for Family Allowances. Another one of the religious titles there. God in a World at War. And a second copy of that one. No idea why I've got two of that, apart from it being very thin. It must be a variation of some sort. Science in War. This is number 74. And New Ways of War. Getting the theme here. The real cost of war. This is all stuff that was very, very relevant to the British person. Psychology of fear and courage. Where do we go from here? The Internment of Aliens. That was a really, really sort of thorny subject, both in America and in Britain. But, there it is. It's studied there. It's discussed. And Europe in Chains. Another quite thin little book here. Yeah, just over 100 pages. We're still in that 1940. One on Russia. Very famous book on Russia. And then another real milestone in the Penguin special series is Aircraft Recognition by R.A. Saville Sneath. So he did these this was the first time Penguin did an aircraft recognition book. Some of the other publishers got in on the act based on the sheer success of this particular book. I think it sold 500,000 copies. There's also hardback editions of this in an oblong format. There's 4 volumes of that, 2 of British, 2 of American, which came out as Penguin Miscellaneous series. But this is the first British volume of aircraft recognition. That is a reprint of it, I believe. Let's have a little look here. There's various printings and they are slightly different. So I think this is that's the second one, reprinted 40. That's the first. That's the reprint. This is a revised edition with a different cover because it's got different aircraft that are being covered there. And the book really was a hit. So it got reprinted. This one here is the first time it was reprinted. This is 1990 edition. And then they did reprint it again. This one came out in 2006. So I spoke to the woman when I was in my book selling days. I spoke to the woman. I was managing the Waterstones in Exeter High Street, and the woman who brought this book back to publication came in with the local Penguin rep, and he introduced her to me. And we were talking about old Penguin. She said, "Oh, don't mention aircraft recognition." And I obviously knew exactly what she was on about. I said, "Why is that?" She said, "Well, when we got the original, when we went to reprint it, the copies were all of the planes. In fact, that's an example. They were really washed out, and they had someone in the office going over and like touching them up with pencil before they got sent to the printers again. So I guess they took it from an original book. So some of these you can see are they're dark and distinguished, but other ones later on, I don't know, maybe they just ran out of time. Some of these aren't quite so good, so I sort of get what she was going on about now." But But anyway, I think it's a fantastic series. Even the reprints are quite difficult to find now. There is a second volume, and there's also variations for America and Canada, which I'd love to get. I haven't got much in the way of variations, although I have got some American specials to show you at the end of this video. Anyway, on to the next shelf. Okay, so looking at this next batch here, the first thing you'll notice is just how thin the books have become. So this is the scarcest sort of period of Penguin specials that there is, because the books are just, well, they're being printed under massive duress, sometimes on not very good paper, recycled paper, at different printers, so they're not exactly uniform with height and size, and they're not Penguin's finest hour. On the other hand, the subjects are amazing. When you consider the time that they were being produced, I mean, it's incredible that they managed to produce so many different volumes. And these are much, much tougher to find than the earlier pre-war ones, or, you know, the first sort of 50 or so that we've already looked at. These I would put in the next bracket up. And anything that's particularly scarce or collectible, I will, of course, once again, point out to you. So, got another cartoon book from Lowe there, Europe at War, which the oblong one there. This one's got card covers. There's a little bit more permanent. And as I said, these aren't mega money. You know, it's like £8 to £10, sometimes even cheaper than that. The Truth About France, Louis Levy. Now, this was also reprinted in French as the French F1 at this same point. So there is a French version of this, which was one of 6 wartime French penguins that they did in that format. Same cover as well, just in French language. And another absolute classic, Ronald Walker. Beautiful design on this one. Once again, this has been reused in Penguin's 90th anniversary celebrations this year. Food, the Deciding Factor, A Guide to Rationing. These are the sorts of books that are actually quite scarce nowadays, and we've got even more rare ones to come. And this was the one that I had a double of. So this is a book on world shipping, another sort of oblong book here. And trade routes, ship types, cargo ports, coasts and canals. Probably, I would imagine, shipping was a bit of a dicey affair at this time in history. But it's a really interesting book, and I do have the second or revised edition, which is the same book, oblong again. It did have an interesting reprint. Another religious title there, The Catholic Church and International Order. Now, this is the first, I would say, it's not mega rare, but it is expensive, this one. This is like £15 to £20. Penguin Book of Food Growing, Storing and Cooking. And these are the sorts of books that just didn't really survive the war. You can see how thin it is. I mean, literally, it's razor thin. 1941, still not the toughest period yet, but there's not a lot to that. And that's a particularly top-shaped copy of that one as well. One of my favourites, Signalling and Map Reading for the Home Guard. Basically, it's the Dad's Army book for Penguin, designed for, well, if you're in the Home Guard, basically. Absolutely fantastic. I really, really love that one. Thin book here by General Wavell, Generals and Generalship. And candidate for one of the thinnest penguins ever, 60 pages. However, there is thinner to come, if you can believe it. And we've got the Bishop of Truro, The Gospel for Tomorrow. Okay. One on the French Canadians there. Wilfred Bovey, fantastic. That's number 94. 95 is Nazis in Norway, another scarce one. My copy's not the greatest, but I don't mind with these. I'm just happy to have a copy, really, in a lot of cases. Planning the War. And this one seems slightly out of place, just by its sheer size. Maybe it got reprinted, or maybe it got printed a little bit later, but numerically it's in spot. It's number 97, Remaking of Italy. 98 there, Diary of World Affairs. And then this one here, 99, is on lay farming. Another farming one. And as I said, books on farming, grow your own, that sort of thing, they would start to become more and more prevalent in the Penguin Special series here. Reaching for the Stars was number 100. More illuminating than any other book I've read on Nazi Germany. That was the Daily Telegraph. Now, this is probably, I think, the single hardest Penguin special to find, although there are copies out there, but I've only ever had 2. So it's a Keeping Poultry and Rabbits on Scraps. Very, very scarce. For a long time, I had a copy with no front cover. And I managed to get a better one over time. It was an absolute guidebook. You can see it would have been used and used to death, really, Extremely scarce. 1941, one of the scarcest Penguin specials, that one. So that one, you're going to struggle to get a nice copy of that. More great stuff. Guerrilla Warfare by Yank Levy. That was also published in the States. Another very, very scarce one. Seed the Plough. This once again, it's on farming. And another religious title, Christianity and Social Order. Another iconic title, The British Way in Warfare. This is a revised edition, so I guess it was updated for the specials. General Liberalism. Health of the Future. The Quest for Security in New Zealand. So there wasn't a lot being written about Australia and New Zealand, and Penguin didn't want to forget it because there was a lot of English-speaking people out there, and it was one of their export markets. In fact, during this particular time in Penguin history, penguins were being printed locally in Australia and New Zealand, so it was something to consider. Another religious one there. How Russia Prepared, USSR Beyond the Urals. You can see the quality of the paper now. You can almost see through it. It's that low grade quality. But that's a pretty nice copy of that one. 1942 now. Dictionary of Science. And here's Aircraft Recognition Volume 2. So based on the massive success of the first one, a second volume was not far behind. Same author, R.A. Seville-Sneath. Made a career of aircraft recognition. So there we are. That's the first print of that one. And I have got a reprint, which I believe is like a revised one. It's like the second or third print, slightly different on that one. Modern Battle. Next one, number 114, ABC of the Pacific. This is another key book. Aimed at, we're starting to look at the problem not just within Europe, but over in in the Pacific. World at War, more wartime cartoons from Lowe, and this one's gone back to softback now because of the paper restrictions, of course. And that's the last little book of his cartoons that we would see. Daria World Affairs, Volume 2. People in Production, an inquiry into British war production. So obviously that was quite a big thing at this point in history, wasn't it? Everyone had to be doing their part. Everyone. Warfare by Words. Another very, very thin little volume there. Then Raymond Bush. So this is soft fruit growing. So some of these titles that we're going to see now, because everyone was on rations and food had got very, very short, there was a massive surge in Britain of basically grow your own veg. Very, very popular pastime during the war, but also it was almost vital just to stay alive. Every little bit of green grass was being ploughed for vegetables of some sort. And Penguin, they reacted to that. So they produced a whole string of these books. They came out as Penguin specials, and then Penguin handbooks was launched separately. So a lot of these books started as Penguin specials, and then they became a Penguin handbook in their own right. A lot of them by Raymond Bush. And it's all, about growing your own. It's fantastic. And I think they're really, really admirable. So that's what this is. We're going to see a few of those coming up now. A Young Citizen, Science and World Order. This was a key title, Is Tomorrow Hitler's? So there was very much uncertainty. We were still very much under the cosh, as it were, in the UK. So we did not know the outcome. What about Business? And look how thin the books have become. Another religious title there. What the Church Teaches. Another one, completely the wrong dimensions. It's not the correct height. It's what I would call a Penguin shorty. There's a few books similar to this, and it's because they would have been, maybe the original run all got bombed, or the printers got bombed and they had to farm it out just to keep it on track. So that's why that one's slightly miscut. And that's another very, very scarce one. Is it as scarce as keeping rabbits and poultry on scraps? I don't know, but it's a key book. And this is another one which you're going to be looking at potentially £30 plus for a really complete copy. Very, very scarce indeed. I mean, if this was a wartime crime one, you'd be talking a few hundred. But because of its subject matter, it is just very, very scarce. Never reprinted. Just the one printing. 1942, extremely scarce. Then obviously that was the subject on everybody's mind, wasn't it? Venereal disease in Britain. And H.G. Wells, look at this. This must be his last one. An indictment of the Roman Catholic Church. Well, we'll leave that one there. Argument of Empire. Soviet Light on the Colonies. Then another one by Raymond Bush that would become a handbook. It's even now got a Penguin handbook sort of design, but this is still the special version of it. The next, Germany. Our New Order or Hitler's? Now, this is another key book, and this one's slightly more expensive to find. How the Jap Army Fights. So once again, eyes were very much looking at the Pacific and the Japanese enemy rather than the Germans. And this is it's another scarce and collectible little book, that one. Why Not Prosperity? There's some more handbooks there. Tree and Fruit Growing. Preserves for All Occasions. Country and Town. Rabbit farming. Can you imagine people farming rabbits these days? John Hubman again, another religious title. Our Settlement with Germany, coming towards the end of the war now. India since Cripps, and poultry farming. So yeah, very much coming towards the end of the war, but we're not there yet. Okay then, so you'll notice with this shelf, we've got the end of the Second World War. I've got my American specials to show you. Haven't got them all, but I've got a few. And then we got sort of Penguin Specials Part 2, which is post-war, up until around 1969, 1970. So continuing the numbering where we were at, we've got the some more handbooks. And these are the green ones here. Very, very appropriate for people during the war. And then what I believe is the hardest Penguin special to get of all. I also think this is the thinnest special, because as you can look, it's not even got a spine, it's got staples. And it is a plan of economic development for India, believe it or not. And this was the last special I had to find to complete my set. Published in May 1944. It was January 1944 in India. It's special number 148. It is very, very scarce indeed. I would put that at upwards of £35 to £50 for that one. Apparently a classic, this one, Miner's Day. Look at the Welsh mining industry. Lend-Lease. And TVA. Democracy on the March. Look at that, the Tennessee Valley Authority. Now, this one is numerically correct, but it's evidently from a much later period. Number 152, Aspects of Conservatism, and it's the Profumo affair. Obviously, I'm showing these in numerical order, but that one, they went back and used that number because it was one that didn't get used on the first time round. Russia and Peace, which is 151. Politics Made Plain, what the next general election will really be about. This is post-war. And this is the very last wartime Penguin special. France, the Birth of the Fourth Republic. And this is special 155. This is published in December 1944. And that is the end at that point of the Penguin specials first time round. Now I'll show you my American ones. So this is the first one, and you'll recognize some of the titles, but this is the American spin on them. So in America, Penguin Books were able to publish these in conjunction with the Infantry Journal, which published a lot of books aimed at the armed forces of America. This is special number 81. It even includes 81. That was the British numbering. So a bit of a weird one. There are also books which I've got in my collection which are just published by the Infantry Journal. They're all wartime related ones. There's a lot of them, and I think they're absolutely fascinating. So I do love these. These are the Penguin ones that I've got though in my collection. So that's Russia. This is Psychology for the Fighting Man. Now this is a first print, and you can see that's the regiment number 052. So this very much would have been carried by a soldier of some sort. That was his regiment, and they were designed to be slipped in the pocket of a soldier. Basically, this is the exact shape and size of these. There's just a reprint, but it's a better copy, but it's just a later reprint of that one. There were some absolute classics, stuff like that. The Moon is Down. That was a Penguin special. 219, an American one. How amazing is that? One of my favourites. The British Navy's Air Arm. Fantastic stuff, this really is. These are great books, but you don't really find them over here very often. They Were Expendable. Really good stuff, this. Short History of the Army and the Navy. This one I got fairly recently. That one I found it I did find this in a British bookshop. Don't forget, there were, during the war and prior to D-Day, there were tens of thousands of Americans stationed in the UK, ready to go over to Europe. So consequently, there are American copies of these books that were left by the American soldiers, but they are few and far between. The Battle is the Payoff, another absolute classic. This is the Navy. All very patriotic stuff. Storm. And then we've got one towards the end, Island Victory, which is the looking at the Pacific War. And one does, again, a Fighting Forces Penguin special published in conjunction with the Infantry Journal. And there's a little list there of some of the other titles that they did. And eventually that numbering phased out with Penguin, and it just became the Infantry Journal, of which I've got some. Right, next we are on to Penguin Specials, the second series. And this is continuing the numbering, so 155 was back there. This is 156, The Case for Communism. And this has now jumped forward 5 years, from 1944 to 1949. So we've had a 5-year gap, and then the series is revived with topics that were becoming prevalent in the UK post-war. And no sign of paper rationing anymore. The books are as big as they need to be. The sort of handbooks and guidebooks tend to have gone, and it is more sort of political and subjects of the time, really. So we'll zoom through these. I'm less of a fan of the post-war ones, because they're not quite so, how shall we say, so symbolic, as it were, of the time that they were being printed. But some of them are. Some of them are. A few religious titles as well again. Spotlight on Asia. Is peace possible? The Middle East crisis. Pattern of the post-war world. Nuclear energy. British economic policy since the war. Interesting one, that one. It's an actual sort of history of the British Football League. Apparently it's an excellent read, that one. Voyage of the Lucky Dragon. The true story of the Japanese fishermen who were the first victims of the H-bomb. And then Hiroshima. So this is a very, very special Penguin special. And it came out as a Penguin main series, but it was the sort of book that would obviously become a Penguin special over time, and eventually became like a Penguin classic. But it was John Hershey went into Hiroshima right after the bomb had gone off, interviewed 5 or 6 survivors and told their story in his book, which was printed in the New Yorker magazine as a special just for that one magazine. It was brought to print very, very quickly in the Penguin main series, and I have done a dedicated video all about how Penguin brought Hiroshima to a wider audience, and I'll try and remember to put a link to that one at the end of this video because it's so fantastic. Geography of World Affairs. And then the last one here is Disengagement in Europe. Right, carrying on here with number 176. So there was a few political titles, and Penguin never really shied away from such things. So this is the Liberal case. Then we've got the Labour case with Roy Jenkins, and the Conservative case, the three main parties in the UK at that time. China, New Age and New Outlook. A thin little one there. Secretary General of NATO. Why NATO? Why indeed? Wow. I mean, where would we be without it? And once again, it's interesting how some of these titles resonate even today, in a lot of cases 60 odd years later. 4 steps in nuclear disarmament and strategy for survival. Obviously, nuclear weapons were very high on people's minds. You know, you had the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the superpowers around the globe were arming themselves up. Khrushchev's Russia. This one's slightly earlier, but they went back and reused, or not reused, but used the number which hadn't been used at that time. And this is Tenants in Danger. So this is the first of many books where Penguin take a look at British social policy of that period. So like overcrowding, inner cities, poverty, National Health Service, welfare state, things like that. Tenants in Danger is the very first one of those, and we'll see some more of those as we go along. Brighter Than 1,000 Suns is obviously on nuclear energy and nuclear war. Hidden Persuaders. America the Invincible. So the Penguin specials are trying to find a bit of an identity. At this point, the Penguin main series are all still being printed with typographical covers. So, yeah, the covers that they do put on these are slightly awkward, shall we say. The Organisation Man. Must Labour Lose? Stagnant Society. This is apparently quite a nice book, Jazz Scene. So jazz was starting to become very, very popular around this time. I mean, alongside the early rock and pop stuff, but jazz was quite big. Congo Disaster. So next, a very famous Penguin special, The Trial of Lady Chatterley. I'm sure we've heard of this one. When Penguin published Lady Chatterley, they were taken to court because it was deemed obscene, which is ridiculous, of course. So Penguin got many learned authors and writers, people in the world of publishing to come up and stand up for the case for it to be published, and Penguin ultimately won. So this is the story of the court proceedings. It's got beautiful illustrations by Paul Hogarth dotted throughout the book. And it was such a momentous publication that the same year Penguin decided to put it out as an Alan Lane Christmas book, which I've got, which is of a 2000 hardback limited edition, which is signed by Alan Lane, and it's a massive victory. And very interesting little bit of Penguin history that. Next, not so much historical, but these are the first time the Penguin Science Survey appeared in the Penguin list for 1961. These obviously should be pelicans, but Penguin obviously didn't know where to stick them. So these first two are published as Penguin specials. Then subsequent years they were published as Penguin main series, where surely they should be as pelicans. So I don't know what was going on there, but it is what it is. Life in the 21st Century. And this is like a little pair, Hanged in Error and Hanged by the Neck. So this is Penguin joining the national conversation about should capital punishment be continued, and evidently in the UK we did outlaw it. So we got rid of actual capital punishment and we changed it to life imprisonment for the very worst offenders rather than actually killing them. What's wrong with the unions? And what's wrong with the church? So these were the sorts of questions that were on people's minds at this time in history in the early 60s. Persecution. Incredible jacket, that one. That is really nice with the blood sort of dripping down. The General says no. Britain's exclusion from Europe. Interesting. Algerian problem. And then this one's quite a scarce one to get. Madison Avenue, for some unknown reason. But yeah, one to look out for that. Asia. Guilty Land. Then one by Bertrand Russell, Has Man a Future? Quite a popular Penguin special, that one. Britain in the 60s, so this is the first one in that particular series. We'll see many more examples of this. It's on communications, so radio, TV, broadcasting, education, Berlin, hostage for the West. Look at the Berlin Wall. There we are, another Britain in the 60s, the family and marriage. I said all these sorts of subjects are going to be touched on now in the Penguin specials. Housing, terror blocks. It's amazing social commentary when you look at it. Sanctions against South Africa. And common sense about smoking. Look at that photo of two, late teenage boys smoking. It's just incredible, isn't it? Right, almost on to the last sort of part of these now. So we're in the home stretch, as it were. And one thing I'd like to point out, if you are thinking of collecting these, one thing that this particular series, it's a bit of a nightmare, is that they all had these red spines, and red is one of those colors which fades so easily. So trying to find these with really nice bright red spines is difficult, and more often than not you see them in this sort of condition where they're faded. You see a few of these, they really are varied here. So if you find nice ones, they're generally worth picking up. So the United Nations, torture, cancer of democracy, France and Algeria. This was an early attempt at a bit of true crime for Penguin. Not something that they did a lot of, but quite interesting with the A6, and they've got that on the spine as well. The sort of the motorway sign. Britain in the 60s again. Look, Crown and the Establishment. Very Peter Blake, that cover, isn't it? The New Cold War. Vagrancy. What a jacket that is, isn't it? What an absolute classic, that one. Very, very nice. Bertrand Russell. Unarmed Victory. What's wrong with British industry? Great Britain or Little England? The Other America. Poverty in the United States. Why Labour? Why Conservative? The Liberal Democrats don't get a look in this time. Another look at nuclear disaster. This is the 60s, of course. Let's have a look at when this is published. Nice photograph cover there. This is 19... It's not obvious, actually. 1963, by the look of it. Cuban Missile Crisis. This is the only one which I've got in B format. So you see it's slightly larger, and it's called Traffic in Towns, number 228. The Intelligent Woman's Guide to Atomic Radiation. So why they thought they needed to have a woman, or a woman's version of it, I don't know on that subject, but it was written by a woman there, Margot. What's wrong with Parliament? Well, probably many things, but, they asked at the time. What's wrong with hospitals? Once again, these are the same sort of issues which are facing us today. The police. Nothing to do with walking on the moon. Oh, there we are. Why Liberal? We were wondering where that one was. Right, now this next one I've got 2 copies of. Yeah, I remember now. The Last Confusion. So this is quite a scarce one. This is on Vietnam, basically. So there is an American edition, which is a Penguin special, 95 cents, with a really great jacket with the American soldiers there. And then they've got that version, which is the British edition. But there we are. The book is the same, but it's the British and American. Very cool. Nice to have the little variation on that one. And that one there, look, Why Liberal again? It looks as if I've got 2 copies of that. And I think that's because that original one there was on my upgrade list. So I've actually got a spare there. So literally I'm finding spare penguins as we go along here. Legacy of Strife. Cyprus, from rebellion to civil order. One on Wilson there, Harold Wilson. Future of the welfare state. The Other England. Brilliant cover that with the sheep there on the road. Amazing. Southeast Asia in turmoil. Crisis of India. The China case, don't know much about that one. That looks like a crime one again. The breakup of the Soviet Empire in Eastern Europe. And 117 days, yeah. An account of confinement and interrogation under the South African 90-day detention law. Immigration and race in British politics. So interesting, isn't it, this stuff? And then another reasonably scarce one here on the Vietnam War, which once again took me a while to get that one. There's a handful of these that are scarce. A new look at Britain's economic policy. Is there any choice? Britain must join Europe. Agreed. One on drugs. Indonesia. From Malta to Vietnam, another Vietnam-related one on American foreign policy. Okay, the last little batch now. I'm almost sad to see this run come to an end because it's been really fun looking through these, and I hope you've enjoyed it yourself. So here we go. Number 252, Arms Without Europe. British Defence in the Modern World. The Incompatibles, Trade Union Militancy, and the Consensus. Suitable case for treatment. Paying for roads. Racial discrimination in England. And After the Common Market. This one, once again, quite scarce. Took me ages to get a copy, and it's completely faded spine. So definitely one to look out for, that one. From Commonwealth to the Common Market. May Day Manifesto, 1968. Gives you an idea when these are being printed. Israel and the Arabs. Science and Technology in Europe. The Politics of Harold Wilson. That's got a Mel Cammon jacket on it. You recognise it with those guys with the big noses. Student Power. Matters of Principle. Labour's Last Chance. Obsolete Communism, the left-wing alternative. Look at that. French Revolution, 1968. Devolution of Power. Prague Spring. Port in Czechoslovakia, 1968. 272, America, the Mixed Curse. The Atlantic Commonwealth. Rights and Wrongs, Essays on Human Rights. 275 is Europe after de Gaulle. A famous one, the last really famous one we're going to see today. This is the Biafra story, and by none other than Frederick Forsyth. This is his first work. This is a highly collectible book by the famous author. This is a particularly nice copy of it. It's really scarce to find this in tip-top shape. I mean, this is virtually unread, so that's a real collectible book, that one. Probably looking at about 20 to 25 for one in that condition. And then these last few, that was number 276. These are ISBN in the specials, so it said 277, 278, 279 and 280, which is my cut-off point for the Penguin specials. So this is the very first ISBN ones, so we're looking at 6970 for these ones. Yeah, 1969. The Greek Tragedy, you've got The Invasion of the Moon, which is an absolute classic. I'd love to get a better copy of that one. Story of Apollo 11. The Rise and Fall of Enoch Powell. And the very last one, number 280, an absolute classic again, Poverty, the Forgotten Englishman. Look at that jacket. Very, very cool indeed. So there you are. I hope you enjoyed that little look through the shelf tour of my Penguin specials. An absolutely fascinating series, I'm sure you'll agree. If you have enjoyed today's video, do please give it the thumbs up. Do please hit the subscribe button if you've not already for regular vintage Penguin book content. And I'll see you again very soon. Bye.